What is going on, gang? Welcome back. Welcome back. And this video is gonna be a little bit different. It's my review video for The Last of Us 2, man. Like I've been waiting to do a video like this, but I just wanted to make sure I got all my words out like I want. Like I wanted it to be done right. And I never done anything like this, so it's like I want y'all to give me complete honesty in y'all own reviews. Like I want to hear y'all thoughts on how y'all felt about the game and everything. Like, if you guys, first off, if you guys haven't played the game yet, spoiler alert, there's gonna be a shit ton of spoilers in this review. So what I need you to do is pause the video, like right now.
Don't worry, I'll wait.
Don't worry, I'll wait. Go get the game, number one, because play the game, and then come right back to this video from where you left off, and then tune into the conversation. All right. So with that being said, let's jump right into it. Alright, listen, now there's a lot of things that can be said about The Last of Us 2, man, but what we not gonna do is we not gonna sit here and pretend like Naughty Dog ain't deliver us a AAA game like with arguably the best graphics and video game mechanics of this generation. Like we're not gonna sit here and front. Now before I get into my rant, first I wanted to say like I have a lot of respect for Naughty Dog, the company, from growing up playing all their amazing franchises. I ain't even gotta list them. Y'all already know where I'm going with that. Like they got games after games. Like they do their thing. They have my respect, man. They have my childhood. So I'm not even gonna go that far. Like, and to Neil Druckmann individually, I have a huge amount of respect for. And as being creators and developers, we got to remember that they're still human, just like us, and they're allowed to make mistakes. I believe that from Neil being the mastermind behind the beautiful work of the first Last of Us, if you want to call it Last of Us Part 1, whatever, that game, and yeah, he was also the lead director behind Uncharted 4, A Thief's End. Like, come on, man, that like those two games alone should attest to this man. But I'm sure we all had high hopes for the second installment of this beloved franchise. It's hard to live up to expectations, y'all. Like, especially when you set the bar so high. Like the first Last of Us could do no wrong. It was perfect. Like from its grounding story to the dark, gritty world and the characters, everything just gelled together so nicely. It's really hard to top that. So with all that being said, Neil and the great developers of Naughty Dog, like, I believe that mistakes were made. And I do believe that The Last of Us Part 2 was a mistake, man. Now I'm going to give you guys like maybe my top 4 reasons where I think Naughty Dog messed up, and these 4 changes that could have, in my opinion, like saved the franchise. And to even add a bonus to that, I'll even give y'all how I would have written the story had I given like the creative demand behind it. I'll let y'all know how I would have written the story up. Shout out, yo. Holla at me, Naughty Dog. We could get together, we could work together. We got to talk numbers, though, baby. Talk numbers to me. Alright. Number 1. Killing Joel and the Naughty Dog lie is my first issue. Now, it's always tricky whenever a franchise wants to pull the plug on an MC. Like, death in any story plays a big part, depending on how does the audience receive it? Is it worth it? Is it really necessary? Like, how does it affect the narrative? Like, in The Last of Us 2, from the player's perspective, or at least from my perspective, I don't think anyone saw that coming. Like, we kind of all thought, since Joel was, like, up there in age, that it's a possibility, but we didn't expect that to go down the way it did. And the trailer, don't even get me started on I haven't felt so misled and disrespected. If you haven't seen the trailer, I'm gonna put it up in just a second. But like, there was a trailer on a specific scene of the game where, I believe it's where Ellie's fighting the wolves, and she like hops over the fence, and then someone grabs her by the mouth. And before the game comes out, like, we don't know what's happening. So in the trailer before the game was released, that same scene was Joel was in it. Like, after Ellie realizes that, oh, she's been grabbed and the person she's with is not a threat, she turns around and acts like, what are you doing here? And then when the camera panels, it's Joel, and he says like, "You think I'm gonna let you do this on your own?" And from that perspective, it made me, at least me, it made me believe that Joel was gonna be a part of the story. Like it was gonna be like the first one. They was gonna travel, get into combat together, so to speak, and I had so much high hopes for it. But then, well, we saw what the final cut was.
What the hell are you doing here?
You think I'd let you do it?
And especially the way they did it, like the way they handled that was just so terribly. Like the disrespect was so real and so uncharacteristic of Joel. Like it just didn't add up. Like this guy, you talking about Joel, like our Joel, like the one who put us on the game, the one who doesn't trust anyone.
Easy. Holy shit. Are we gonna help him?
Put your seatbelt on, Ellie.
What about the guy?
Who can smell? He could smell boo boo from a mile away. Like
He ain't even hurt.
the one who single handedly takes armies and waves of people on, like he's freaking Rambo. You get the point. Like he taught us how to not trust people in the world we live in. That's how y'all took him out. It just don't add up. Number 2, having us play as Abby so soon. Like, okay, the reason why I think this was a bad choice is because it feels like a literal slap in the face to all the players who this new random character who came out of nowhere with no explanation brutally murders our beloved hero
after he literally just saves her life, might I add. Like, let's not even go there.
Now we have to take control of her. Like, that was just cold, Naughty Dog. That was just grimy. Number 3, the flashbacks. Now I'm not gonna lie, the first flashback that we did, and I saw Joel again for the first time, it made my heart warm up, man. It was a beautiful moment to experience with like Ellie and Joel on their father-daughter sort of vibe. Like that's the reason why I wanted to continue the story in the first place. But in the same breath, it hurt because it's like it's a reminder to us that like Joel is really gone. Like y'all really offed my son in the first half of the game. Like so it was like a bitter sweetness to it, which was still grimy. Number 4, trying so hard to make Abby likable. So anyone that's played the game, like they can tell you that as soon as we got control of Abby, it was like a complete change in like the atmosphere and the vibe of the game. Like, for instance, as Ellie, we was on a revenge tear. Like we were killing every and anything that was in our way, from stabbing dogs to brutally murdering the wolves and slapping up infected. It was just so dark and it was really, really dark. And then we switch over to Abby, and as soon as we get control of her after the killing of Joel, it's like the first thing you see her is like helping her father rescue a trapped zebra. She's out playing fetch with dogs. She's going up against all her beliefs to like save her boyfriend or ex-boyfriend or whoever Owen was to her. She rescued the kids who was actually on the opposing team. She was just like so noble and doing all these great things after she just violated us. It was like, yeah, well, you know, I'm a good person at heart. And then on top of that, it's like I knew from playing that, like once I kept like from the very first time we escaped death with her, I kept saying to myself like, yo, they really want to like push this character into the franchise. And then they wanted us to feel bad for her for I guess the acts that happened in her past and stuff, and it almost worked on me, like to an extent. When I was playing through the game, I started to feel bad, but after you've done her so dirty, it's like, how can I feel bad for you? I want to see you dead. If they would have just changed, if they could just change those top 4 things, I think the game would have been so much better. And now hear me out. Alright, this is my version of The Last of Us Part 2. So yeah, once more time, Naughty Dog, feel free to hit me up, bro. Like we could fix this. We could rearrange this, scrap the whole deal and then add this version to the store. Or this could be like, the definitive edition. I'm just throwing that out there, little green dribble on the salt. Alright. Well, in my version of The Last of Us, we gotta go back to the first part. We gotta go back to the ending of part 1. After Marlene tells Joel about the operation and how, like, everything is gonna go down and like Ellie won't make it. It pretty much plays out the same. Joel goes on a killing spree. He murders everybody. He saves Ellie. But instead of killing Marlene, like in cold blood, like the way he did, he just shoots her the first time and leaves her to bleed out. So then now it leaves like a little ominous air, so that way Marlene can potentially come back in the franchise. Like, why would you kill off such a great character like Marlene? Like, we didn't know much about her besides that she had history with Ellie that was never really touched on. And the scene where they were driving, Ellie wakes up, and then the infamous lie, all of that is the same. All of that stays the same. And then we fast forward to The Last of Us 2, and the start of the game with Joel and Tommy doing their little introduction, basically like recapping everything that played out in the first game. That could all stay the same. That could all be lit. But instead of the flashback sequences like they had us do, make those sequences like first half of the game, like they could just jump and make those like pinnacle moments in with Ellie and Joel, because that's really what the players wanted to see. Like, that's why we got The Last of Us 2, to see what was going to happen with Ellie and Joel, like how their relationship was going to grow, if Ellie ever found out the truth and all of that stuff. Like, those little flashbacks could have just been sequences played out, like little chapters leading up to like Ellie growing up, and like us actually going on the growth that those two had together, instead of like segmented flashbacks where we gonna reminisce on Joel not being here. Like, those could be like important milestones leading up to the inevitable action that was gonna take place. Me personally, like, I didn't like the way Ellie reacted in the scene where Joel actually tells her the truth. Like, after finding out the truth, the way she reacted, I didn't really vibe with it. But I mean, for the sake of not dragging this video out any longer than it needed to be, let's just keep it the same. Like, so now we're up to the introduction of Abby, right? So instead of the group looking for Joel, it would be the small group. There'll just be a small group of Fireflies that, after the events of the hospital, they just went on their own, but they stuck together because obviously they're friends and they're searching to regroup in Santa Barbara, like Owen was at the end of the game. So the group would be led by Owen, and Abby would still have the revenge of like killing Joel, or killing the man who killed her father, basically, in the back of her mind. The way it played out, I would have that group looking for Tommy and Eugene, because they were former Fireflies. Like, it just makes sense they was looking for them in order to recruit them to go back to Santa Barbara, basically, so that way they can keep looking for a cure. Because it just seems right. The gameplay could play out exactly the same with Abby, like waking up and then seeing Owen talking. They go on their little walk, they go outside or whatever the case is, and they see Jackson right after like Owen showing Abby where Jackson is. Owen breaks the news about Mel to Abby, telling her that she's pregnant, and Abby and Owen can get into a small argument about it. And after a few moments of arguing, Owen can say that they should wait till the morning, to like basically take the group down to where Jackson is, because it's a far trip. They're still like kind of at the top of a mountain, if I remember correctly. And then from being in that argument now, Abby's tight. She doesn't really want to go back because of what she just found out, so she decides to go on her own to make her way down there to, like, I guess, plead the case to whoever's in Jackson. Like, yeah, my friends are up there, but I need help or whatever. We need help or whatever. We're looking for these two people. We heard they would be here. And, like, she still gets jumped by the Horde the same way while trying to reach Jackson, and still gets saved by Tommy and Joel. They barely escape the Horde and all that. Like, everything from that playthrough, from that mission stays the same. But, as they make it back to Abby's group now, they're greeted, and like once Tommy and Joel explain who they are, just like in the scene instead of their being gunned down, Tommy tells them that Eugene passed away and that he gave up on the Fireflies a long time ago. And now his wife would like kill him if he was to try to go back to those days. But Tommy still offers them like to come to Jackson so they can restock and like go on their way to safe passage or whatever, because, you know, they shelter them and they help them escape the horde or whatever, like to get, I guess, let, you know, to repay the favor. Now, to speed things up a little bit, a few days, like Team Abby makes their way to Jackson, right? Like, just hear me out. And they start to like gel and get comfortable inside of Jackson. Like relationships start to form. Like Dina and Ellie have their relationship that's going right after the breakup of Jesse. But now let's just say Nora and Jesse now become a thing. They start getting into a relationship. And since Ellie and Joel aren't really speaking after finding out the truth of what happened or whatever, Abby would go on patrols with Joel and Tommy, seeing as, like, you know, from their first mission that they know that Abby can handle herself out there. So they start going on missions, and Joel starts to trust Abby a little more. They start forming a little father-daughter relationship sort of bond sort of thing. And then after a few patrols, the group comes across some wolves or something like that. Like, just to introduce the wolves into the story. Let's just say Mel. Like, Mel comes across a young wolf who's bleeding out. And he explains to her that, you know, she needs to contact their commander and tell her what happened. Like Mel being a medic, she could try to save them out of like the kindness of her heart, and then contact the commander. But the commander turns out to be Marlene. This is why Marlene needed to live in my story. Marlene tells Mel like over a radio to burn the body because the person that she's trying to save is infected. So she's like, oh, just, you know, do what you have to do and like leave their dog tag somewhere where they could find it, basically. So Mel does it because she's a noble person. And then maybe a few days pass by, and Ellie, and let's say Ellie, Jordan, and Mel are like on a patrol, so to speak, to that same lookout where they cleared out the horde at, and that's where, close to where Mel burnt the body. So now Mel wants to go see if the dog tag is still there, but as soon as they're patrolling, Mel is like going to the spot where she left the body burn, and she hears like rustling in the bushes, so she reaches for her gun, but a barrel touches the side of her head, and a voice tells her to don't do it. A random wolf has Mel at gunpoint, and then shouts,
"I got a straggler, ma'am. She was armed."
And then out of the bushes comes Marlene. Mel says,
Please don't shoot me. I'm not hostile. I'm a medic.
the wolf tells Mel
To shut up.
and then Marlene tells the soldier to stand down. And she says, I think she's the one who buried your brother. As he puts the gun down, Ellie and Jordan come from the opposite direction, and Jordan and Ellie draw their guns and ask, who are you and what's going on? But as Ellie and Marlene make eye contact, Ellie's eyes like starts to water up, and her voice starts to crack, and she says, Marlene. And I mean, like, I got a whole speech on how this could go down. That's just my take on it. Like, let's just say, for instance, the Wolves are still a faction, and they're like the aggressive Fireflies, right? Like, they're the ones who, they're trying to look for a cure, but they're also trying to survive in this world. And just, it's so many different loopholes or plot holes within the story that just don't add up. Like, Mel is, well, was the closest, I think they said it in the story, like, she was Abby's father's best student, so to speak. So Abby's father was the only person who could manufacture a cure that was killed. So having Mel in the story could have played a way better role if they would have, like, you know, actually used Mel. Like, Mel could have been like the last person alive who could actually continue the procedure to come up with a vaccine. Like, I feel like the game being about, like, the story in whole being about Ellie being immune to this disease that is taking over the world. It's like this infection that's just growing and that no one can stop. It's like, you would think that having a cure or somebody who's immune would play a bigger role, you know? Like, in this game, I just felt like this, like, The Last of Us 2 is just a tragic story where everybody suffers loss. There's no real win. It's just such a sad and depressing game. And it's like they stir away from where I think the core essence of the story was. So back to Mel now. Mel being Abby's father's best student, she can also be like, let's say they gave her the tools, or she can study his work, and she might be able to create a vaccine now. Marlene seeing Mel, they having that interaction. Her seeing Ellie, Marlene could be the one who never really gave up on getting a cure, you know? Because she know that Ellie's out there somewhere, I just gotta find her. Just like how Joel was like, yo, come after her. Like, she can legit come after her. But just not as heavily. Like, she has no idea where they could have been, and they just stumbled upon them by, like, fate, so to speak. So now let's say Ellie and Marlene go off. Because, you know, Marlene and Ellie actually knew one another. Like, Marlene knew Ellie from birth. She was a friend of her mother.
I get it. But whatever it is you think you're going through right now is nothing to what I have been through. I knew her since she was born. I promised your mother I would look after her.
So they have way more connection than Joel and Ellie ever did. Ellie and Joel bond grew like over the course of the game that we played, but before the game, Marlene was like a second mother to Ellie. So now you could use that sort of bond that they had, and then wrap a story around that, like Marlene explaining to Ellie what really happened at the hospital, verbatim, let her know that this person was gonna create a cure. I was willing to sacrifice you to save the world. We see in this game that that's what Ellie would have wanted. So now Ellie goes missing. Mel goes with the actual, like, let's just say Mel and Ellie goes with Marlene back to the Wolf base now. Now Dina and everybody in Jackson, like Joel and Tommy and everybody, are wondering where the hell they went. They go on a mission to find Ellie now. The whole game is like Joel, Abby, Tommy, or whatever, growing as father and daughter, or bonding or whatever, trying to find where Ellie is, going on this great adventure across Seattle to see where, like, Ellie's been taken. And they come across the Scars, because I do like the two characters that they added with the Scars, the two brothers and sisters. I think it was Levi and I forgot the other girl's name. But anyways, like, those two characters were dope. So they could come across the Scars, like, traveling there, still have the same sort of history beef between the two, because that was really dope. But then have ways like Abby gets captured. That's how she gets separated from the group that's like trying to rescue Ellie, so to speak. And then the game where Abby's by herself searching for Ellie, but has to fight with the Scars against the wolves to get to Ellie. Like, and Isaac could still be there. Let's say Isaac and Marlene are like either related or in a relationship, and like however you want to spin it. Like, Marlene could have been like the Firefly side, and then Isaac could have been like the hard, gritty wolf side, and together they like gel, like yin and yang, so to speak. So Marlene is trying to create a vaccine. Ellie's down for it, so they're trying to take her back to wherever their base is at, so that way they can do it. And Mel could be the key as a medic and a scientist that can be the only one who can actually do it. So now, like, the game is them trying to get there. And I would have, if it was necessary to kill Joe off, I would have killed him. Like, one way I would have killed him off with like a blaze of glory would have been fighting against the Rat King, so to speak. Like, Joel is total badass. We done seen him take on hordes of enemies. It's like Joel is damn near undefeatable. So what better way to take out our knight in shining armor than to go against the most ancient, lethal, super powered infected there is. Like, let's say Joel rescues Abby from, like, the same way he rescues Ellie from the bloater, he would try to rescue Abby from the Rat King, and then the Rat King dies, and that would be like the epic conclusion to Joel in the story, trying to rescue Ellie like we all know he would. I'll even spin it, and like I'll even add, like, during the adventure, somehow, some way, shape, or form, like getting closer to Ellie, Abby finds out about Joel being the one who kills her father, and then her and Joel could have like a standoff. They could fight it out, but instead of like offing him, killing him, she like stops, because now they have this bond that they've had together, and Abby sees Joel's soft side, and she has a connection to him, so that way we could understand and feel remorse for Abby's situation, like they tried to get us to do. Like, the whole game, they wanted us to feel sorry for Abby and justify what she did. But the way they played that out is like nobody likes Abby. Or maybe the few weirdos out in the world who's like, yeah, I like Abby. Like, unless, like, those 2 or 3 people in the world. But the majority of the fans hate Abby's character. And as I played the game, like, I was so mad because I'm currently playing the game over, and Abby's parts are way more funner than Ellie's parts. Like, Abby got all the lit gear, all the lit sequences. Like, sniper scene on the bridge was one of the best parts of the game. Fighting the Rat King, fire. Like, what else did Abby do? The way her combat is just way more litter. And her story is just like she's like the hero of her story. Our story, Ellie is like just a revenging, like a merciless killer, but Abby's like a hero in a sense. Like, we could have had so much more love for the characters. Even if the characters died off and we just met them, we could have felt that. You know what I'm saying? Like, we would have felt remorse. Like, everybody that got killed from Abby's story, I was like, good. Like, who cares? I didn't have no remorse for Abby's characters. Maybe Nora was probably it. Like, the way we torture Nora, I felt like a little bad. But even so, we felt like we had the right to do that because they took away Joel from us. So if they never did that, and we just sort of like saw them as individuals that we was getting close to, and then they just was dying left, right, and center, then we could be like, damn, bro. Like, we could have felt sorry. Like, imagine watching Jesse die, knowing that Jesse and Nora had a relationship that they was working on. That would have hurt even more. And I like Jesse's character, even though he was like briefly introduced. And now we got his son. It's just a lot of things that don't connect. But that's the way I would have written it up, at least. That's how I would have had the story go out. Like, even if, like, I wouldn't have killed Joel. I think I said that already. Like, I wouldn't have taken Joel out. But if I would have, at least make him go out in a blaze of glory. Because Joel is, like, complete badass. Like, any other way to do that was just, it wouldn't do the character justice. And then it would have kept us going. Like, let's say the ending of the game now, the ending of my version of the game, playing as Abby, and we make it to the hospital. So it all comes full circle. So Abby's back at the same hospital now where her father died, and they're trying to create another vaccine in the same spot. Ellie is down for it. Like, Abby tells Ellie that Joel is dead and he died trying to get to you, or whatever the case is. And then Ellie can have a moment where she's like hesitating on deciding if she wants to go through with the procedure or not, and that could be like our cliffhanger or whatever the case is. Like, the same way they ended off the first one, just sort of like not knowing what's gonna happen next. But I guess from Naughty Dog's perspective, maybe they want to keep like Ellie's character, because obviously Ellie's the main character of the franchise now, but Ellie can only help the world in her death. Like, that's the only way they can come up with a vaccine. So for Ellie to have all these connections and to be the main character, the story can't necessarily get a cure by killing off her, because then who's left in the franchise? You know what I mean? That's why, I don't know. Like, it's 1,000 different ways that you could have written it to make it make a little more sense. But, like, my brain hurts right now. Like, even briefly, like, let's just say Ellie got pregnant and she had a daughter now. Then killing off Ellie could have been justifiable, and then her daughter carrying on the franchise with Joel, so to speak. But killing off Joel for like no reason other than to introduce us to Abby was just so poorly. It was a poor choice from Naughty Dog. But that's my rant, man. I've been freaking talking for 30 minutes. My throat all dry and shit. Like, I've been going off. So what are your guys' thoughts, man? How do y'all think the game should have played out? In like, do y'all have your own versions of y'all story? Like, do y'all think about things like this, or am I just if I'm a little cuckoo? If I just sit here and just be in my thoughts? Like, I want to know how y'all feel about my version. Would y'all play my game? Does my game sound lit? If so, yo, we could holla at Naughty Dog and be like, yo, son, I just watched this video. Y'all should take a little glimpse, see what he talking about. Feel me? Feel me? Get a little eye on that. But with that being said, guys, that's the end of my rant. Be sure to hit that like button, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Just do it because you're a nice person. Ain't no pressure. Just hit that like button, hit the bell, all that shit, all of that good shit. And with that being said, guys, stay safe,